If you're a woman dealing with a husband who stonewalls or shuts down, the effects of it on your mental health are devastating. Over time, you'll start to feel small, invisible, like you can't express yourself, and you end up giving in just to end the silence and feel some connection again. But it doesn't have to be like this. In today's video, I'll break down why stonewalling is one of the fastest ways to kill your relationship and exactly how you can stop it before it's too late. When you are on the receiving end of stonewalling, it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It actually starts to affect your sense of self. At first, you might just excuse the behavior as he's just tired. Or maybe he just needs a little bit of space because he's stressed and overwhelmed. But over time, if this pattern keeps happening, it will start to take a toll on your self-esteem. Slowly, you'll start to overthink everything, second guess yourself, wondering if you said the right thing, or asking yourself if you said something to set him off into the silence. You go out of your way to say things the right way to make sure you're not triggering him into a shutdown. You find yourself checking his mood before you talk. You may even keep things surface level just to avoid another wall of silence. I mean, sometimes the silence can last days and months in really severe cases. I hope you're not one of those women, but it can happen. And slowly, this is gonna start to affect your confidence. You kind of start to wonder, is this me? Am I the problem? Am I doing something wrong? I've heard women I work with say things like, I try to hide my tears and cry in the bathroom to make sure he doesn't see me like that. Or I've stopped bringing things up again because I'm afraid it's going to lead to another fight and he's going to stonewall me for a number of days or months. And sometimes I've had to plead with him and beg him to stop the silent treatment. So this is the kind of quiet pain that you'll have to live through when this pattern becomes chronic and problematic. In all honesty, sometimes it feels easier to get our partner's anger and yelling versus their silence. Because the silence makes us feel so unimportant and abandoned. And it's this excruciating pain that we have to live through. Emotionally, your household feels very heavy. You almost want to avoid going home at night and try to keep yourself busy with other things. But also you feel very alone, rejected, anxious, and most importantly, unseen. Physically, you're also in pain. You may get tension in your chest, headache, constant rumination about things, reviewing things that were said. And lastly, perhaps you're gonna run into so many sleepless nights because of this issue. The constant cycle of trying to reconnect and being shut out puts your body into survival mode. You're in high alert, dreading the next time he shuts down, and that's where your mental health starts to suffer. You basically have started to live in fear. To avoid feeling ignored and abandoned, you start to ignore your own feelings and emotional needs and will not even try to share them again because there's no point. Just thinking about that sort of helplessness breaks my heart, and knowing that some of you may be going through this right now. If this hits home for you as women and you've been stonewalled before, tap the like button or say yes in the comments. It just makes other women feel less lonely and see that they're not the only ones going through this. If you're watching this video, it probably means that stonewalling has hurt you and your relationship in some way. And maybe you're at a point where you're wondering, does my relationship even stand a chance to be saved or improve? Can I get out of this vicious cycle? If you really want to know where things stand and what should be your next step to get out of this cycle of stonewalling and restore that sense of emotional safety in your relationship again, I have a relationship test for you that's completely free that tells you exactly how your relationship is doing right now when it comes to emotional safety and the unhealthy relationship patterns that you're currently dealing with, and tells you exactly what your next step should be to start to turn things around. You can download this test at parisacounseling.com/relationship test or grab it from the link right under this video. This is a test I swear by. I give it to the couples I work with in my couples therapy practice, and they share with me that it's very eye-opening for them when they start to complete this test together. Now let's talk about how stonewalling damages the relationship over time if you don't address it. The more this pattern of stonewalling happens between the two of you when you argue or have a disagreement, the less emotionally safe your marriage becomes. This is because, of course, you start censoring yourself. You don't share the things that are on your mind, which diminishes vulnerability. You start to avoid certain topics that are really, really important to you. Maybe even you soften your tone, try to play it nice and keep things light. But that's just a mask. You really are pretending to keep the peace, to keep the bond. And it just feels inauthentic and disconnected. After all, what's the point of being in a relationship if you can't share your innermost thoughts and feelings with your partner? That is such a lonely experience. You have a partner, but you can't seem to share these things with him. And here's the thing, the peace you think you have in your relationship isn't true peace. It's just survival and avoidance. If you're not talking about vulnerable things that are really in your heart, for both you and your partner, you start to feel disconnected. Yes, you may still talk about kids, running errands, doing daily chores, just talking about surface practical things. But the emotional connection, the real us, starts to fade away. You're no longer a team and in a true partnership. I've seen couples who live under the same roof, but they're living like roommates. Of course, on the outside, it's very polite and functional, but emotionally, they feel very alone and miles apart. And the unfortunate thing is that they both miss each other, but somehow they can't find their way back to one another. And this is one of the most common complaints I get from couples who come and see me. They just feel disconnected, like roommates, alone, but they also miss that connection. And then when we try to go a little bit deeper, we find they're stuck in this vicious cycle of stonewalling. So here's what I'm telling you. If you let stonewalling take over your relationship for too long, it will become your new normal. And that's how couples start drifting apart until there's nothing else to hold on. The reality is, once you're too old and have let your husband get away with the stonewalling for years and years, it's so hard to get out of those hardened patterns. So if you're a couple in your first few years of marriage and the stonewalling happens sporadically, not all the time, I really recommend that you see a couples therapist. I actually have a video on how to choose the best couples therapist and start couples therapy on the right foot, and I'll link it right under this video. It's best to get professional help and address it now before it's too late and before these patterns become habits. The more you let it happen, the more it's going to escalate. First day, it may be 1 day of silent treatment and stonewalling. Then it's going to be a few days. Then it's going to be a week. Then it's going to be perhaps months, especially if your husband is doing it to gain leverage or power or influence. So you can't let this pattern go on forever and ignore it. Now, of course, not all hope is lost. There's always a solution for these relationship issues and communication patterns. So what can you actually do to address stonewalling in your relationship? First, you need to acknowledge that stonewalling is a real problem, and there's nothing productive that will come out of stonewalling, no matter how you try to justify it. So you need to come to terms with the reality of what you're faced. What you're dealing with is a very unhealthy pattern of dealing with conflict and arguments. You can't be emotional when dealing with stonewalling, meaning you have to be able to take a step back and look at things and the relationship pattern very rationally. This is to help you analyze a situation, and it's kind of like a chess game. Like, you need to know what kind of move you need to make with your husband to have the right influence. So if he's shutting down and you start to chase and pursue just to end the silence, over time, this can backfire. So the more you start to chase, the more he can actually shut down. So you need to start noticing these patterns. You don't want to act from a place of, I'm feeling like being punished, I'm feeling abandoned or disconnected. So just to get the connection, I'm going to come out and pursue you. This can backfire. Think of it as a dynamic. Do I want to give this dynamic more power? If I don't want to give it more power, what is it that I need to do differently next time? And have a plan. The other thing is you need to stay calm and regulated when you want to face that stonewalling husband of yours. Sorry that came out wrong, but it is what it is, right? So you need to stay regulated. You need to stay with your network of friends, have that social support, and also get validation from a supportive person, a supportive friend, or a therapist, because dealing with the silence can make you feel so invalidated, feeling like you're not entitled to have your feelings or your emotional needs met. So the more you connect with your raw feelings, with your genuine emotional needs that are not being met in the relationship, the more you stay in touch with that versus trying to rescue and save the relationship, the more power and agency you have to change this dynamic. Because at some point, dealing with a partner who shuts down may require you to set some boundaries and choose yourself over the relationship. Because a lot of times the silent treatment and stonewalling is about kind of gaining leverage or power. Just to keep things simple, make sure you're doing things to feel nourished, recharged, and just stay regulated. So when you are to face your husband, you can draw boundaries when needed. You can stay calm when communicating and not do things that will trigger him and push him more into shutting down and stonewalling. While knowing all of this is very important, it's not enough to actually stop the stonewalling in your relationship. Because until you find out why your husband is actually shutting down, this pattern will keep repeating itself no matter what you try. Here's the truth. There isn't just one reason men stonewall. I'll show you what's really behind his silence and the simple practical steps you can start using today to finally change how he responds to you in the video on your screen now.